Hey, this is Spanner from the Spanner and Rig Show, and we are here with the Congressman Kelly Armstrong. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Get to talk about sports, so I'm happy.
Yeah, I saw some videos of you, in Congress there fighting for North Dakota rights, and I thought, man, this guy would be awesome to have on the show to talk about sports. So, first off, tell me, what's your favorite football team?
My favorite football team is the Miami Dolphins, so I'm used to losing.
Well, one thing is it tells me that you're loyal. So that's
So this
important.
so the first football game I ever remember watching is when Dan Marino beat the Bears in '85. Monday Night Football kept them from an undefeated season, and I was just you grow
38
up
to
in
16.
Dickinson, North Dakota, so I've been with them ever since.
38 to 16. I remember that game like it was yesterday. I was at my grandma's house, and I'm so pissed still that Steve Grogan and Tony Eason combo quarterback thing of the Patriots upset the Dolphins in the championship game, ruining that Super
Yeah,
Bowl, which would have been like
the
a
only plus
mammoth
side
Super
to
Bowl.
that is the linebacker. Yeah, the only plus side to that is the linebacker for the Patriots at the time was a guy named his last name was Nelson, and he played with my uncle at NDSU.
Oh, that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. Tell me some other sports. Baseball. What else you got?
Yeah, so you were talking about seeing me on the floor of Congress. We talk about everything going on right now, and everything's partisan, and everybody's fighting all the time. The most traffic I've ever got as a member of Congress is when I congratulated the Dickinson girls softball team for their state championship. Wore their hat on the floor, which is a break of decorum, but it was worth it. I helped start that program in Dickinson. I was the American Legion baseball coach out there for 5 years in college and law school, and then also was the head of the North Dickinson Baseball Club for about a decade. So I spent a lot of time in Legion baseball parks across this state, and it really truly is my favorite sport in the whole world.
That's pretty cool because we're having Amy Friedley on the show tonight. And she's a member of that Dickinson team that beat Bismarck, was it 10-0 in the state championship game last year. They
Yeah,
all
really true. I was there, and usually when you win a 10-0 game, it's airs and all the other stuff. And I was a part of a lot of 10-run games. When we coached baseball, we used to play like Rapid City and Billings, and you're usually just completely outclassed. That wasn't so much as they were outclassed. Bismarck had beat them earlier in the year. They just came out, and I mean, I lack of a better word, they just dominated them in just absolutely every aspect of the game. Like even when they got thrown out at home, it was the right play. And I actually texted the coach yesterday. She was getting ready for the spring season, put a picture of the pileup on the when they after they won on the, well, it's not a pitcher's mound, but on the bump. And I said, I still want that picture framed in my office. So
yeah, that Bismarck beat him in the WDA title game 5-0, like what, a week earlier or a week and a half earlier, and Dickinson came back and won that. I was just on TikTok live, and I posed a question to the all the kids that the follow Spinner Rigs. Can anyone beat Dickinson this year in softball? So, and there's a bunch of
uh,
teams throwing out there.
yeah, it always
Central Cast says they
it
can
comes
beat
down
them.
to the same, it comes down to the same thing no matter what level. When you have a ball and bat sport, it's all going to depend on pitching. Always does.
Yeah, yeah. I'm a huge Dodger fan, so I love baseball. Couple reasons. One, I have a ritual of I get on my elliptical during every Dodger game throughout the summer and fall, spring, summer, fall. So every October I'm like super fit, and then I start to lose shape as the winter goes through the holidays. But um, I love the Dodgers World Series run. It'll be one of my favorite moments next to the '88 World Series run. So let me ask you something, and I think it's important. Maybe for you know. Well, let me retract. Just to let you know, my sports show is specifically about North Dakotans' perspective. And I'm going to talk North Dakotans' perspective. So, as example, we had the GOAT talk, and who's the greatest basketball player of all time, and we let the kids vote, or the North Dakotans vote for, and it was like 33-31 Michael Jordan over Larry Bird. LeBron got one vote. So if you ask anyone else in the country, it's probably a LeBron, Michael, or Kobe. But in North Dakota, they love Larry Bird. So we talk about Larry Bird because of that. But North Dakotans' perspective, and I was a youth coach for many years. You coached youth sports as well. Talk about balancing, development versus winning when you're coaching youth sports.
So when I moved back to Dickinson after I had started practicing law school in Grand Forks, I coached a 12-year-old travel team for a couple years, and it was really interesting. They asked me to coach because they had a good group of kids, but I was the first coach that had ever coached them that wasn't their parent. And I always use this as an example. I tell people this all the time. If I ever write a book, it's not going to be on politics. It's going to be on what I call the youth sports industrial complex. Uh, every year when you coach baseball, you pencil in a team, right? You know who graduated from your team, you know who didn't, all of that. And every year, so when you do this, there's a surprise. Like 3 weeks into the season, your left fielder, who you thought was going to be your 9 hitter, is now all of a sudden your center fielder and your 3 hitter. The guy you had penciled in at shortstop didn't develop at all in the offseason, and so now he's your fourth infielder, and all of that happens. Except what I've noticed is, and listen, I get it, but what I've noticed, particularly with youth sports, that never happens. The starting lineup when you're 9 is the same as the starting lineup when you're 10, is the same as the starting lineup when you're 11, is the same as the starting lineup when you're 12. And as somebody who, my kids are just coming into that age, I just look around and I'm like, there's something wrong here, because there's no way that happens all the time. And we got teams traveling 600 miles to go to play in different tournaments all the time. And one thing which is really kind of sad, when we were kids, I'd get on my bike and we'd go play pickup sports, right? You get done with stuff, and now it's just like the seasons are so long and so intense at such a young age. And I think sometimes we forget the developmental part. And I got one really quick story about this. I was coaching this team, and I came out, and it was during a doubleheader, and I actually had to run to the restroom. And on the way back, the parent of the kid coaching, who's actually been a friend of mine, a supporter of mine forever, comes up to me and he's like, "Hey, you changed Luke's arm slot." And I'm like, "Yep." He goes, "Well, he's not throwing as hard." I go, "Nope." I go, "But he's throwing strikes." And so you develop these things and you try and get these kids to get rid of hitches in their swing, because once they start seeing off speed pitches, if they have a hitch in their swing, they're not going to hit it. But in order to do that, they might lose 40 points on their batting average for a while. And I just like, you want these kids to win. Nobody remembers what their 10-year-old travel record is, but you remember if you win a state championship. And I think that's what you're always kind of driving towards, which is why I always like Legion Ball, because you get to go play in Rapid, you get to play in, go to Wyoming, you get to do all that stuff. But it was also Dickinson against Bismarck, right? Not Dickinson High versus Century. And from a town like Dickinson, where I grew up, when you could go win a game against the entire town of Bismarck, that was a big deal.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting because, I coach, little kid soccer for years, and all those juniors and seniors at Minot High right now, I coached them when they were 10, 11, 12, 13. And in soccer, you could just get the goalie to punt the ball over one of your best player and win little kids games very easily, especially when the fields are smaller. But I always forced the girls to bowl it out, so everyone had to touch it going up the field. Develop all the players and not just one. It's interesting, and I bring it up because I always feel like coaches are either all the way development or all the way winning, and no one's ever like in the middle anymore. It's almost like American politics. You're either blue or red, and no one's in the middle. And I always felt like a coach should have parameters on how they're going to sub, so that the subs are done. Everyone's going to play. Blah 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 blah. What are you going to rotate positions, and that's all up to you. But once you set your parameters, you got to try to win. I feel like we're losing competitiveness in the United States.
Well, that's what I always used to say. Like when I was coaching 12-year-olds, they'd only dress like 11 or 12 kids a lot of times. And I'm like, I want all 15 on the roster. And like, how are we going to get them all playing time? I'm like, I'll get them all playing time. Well, how are we going to win? I go, because I got to win with the 14th kid on my roster as well as the second kid on my roster. I like, just because you're subbing somebody in doesn't mean you're not trying to win. But the flip side to that, right, is the participation side. You're in a state championship game. I mean, 12-year-olds are 12. They're not stupid. Like, you play your best kids to win a championship game. What you do is you give everybody a chance to compete through that whole season and give them fair opportunities to compete, and they'll get it. They know what's going on. But I mean, I think there's just a change, right? We used to like all when I ran a baseball program, you know what I wanted out of 13-year-olds? Lots of them. That's what I wanted because it's a summer program. Kids are going to the lake. Kids are into football. Kids are into hockey. Kids are going to lose. So by the time they're 17 or 18, I'm going to lose 2/3 of them. I don't care what their 9-year-old travel record was. I just want lots of 13-year-olds who want to play baseball.
I 100% agree. That's how we ran the Minot Soccer Club. We had pools, not teams. We had pools. And so we'd go to events all the time and just let the kids sign up for whatever event they wanted to go to. If they wanted to go to the lake one weekend, it didn't bother us. But so UND Law School, UND
Yeah.
grad, pretty cool. So I won't put you in the corner of asking you what's North Dakota's favorite team. Is it the Bison or the Sioux? I'm sure, or Fighting Hawks. Sorry.
So that's
So you got your
interesting. So
opinions on
my
that.
my best friend in high school and my college roommate was a guy named Devin Carlson. And at the time, Chris and Kyle Carlson were both playing football for NDSU while we were rooming together at UND. My dad wrestled at NDSU. Two of my uncles played football at NDSU. And the answer is UND hockey is the best sport in North Dakota.
So Spainer, I'm a Bison guy. Riggs, he's not here. He's obviously a Sioux hockey guy or Fighting Hawks guy. But
Well,
I
you can be a
actually,
Sioux hockey guy and not a Fighting Hawks guy.
you, can you be? You said you could be a Sioux hockey guy and not a Fighting Hawks guy, or are they the same thing?
So the other day we had a deal, and I got to do after the first puck drop. They have you. I would because I was there. So Senator Hoven and I got to do the commercial break like on the ice, and Senator Hoven does all this like welcome to the Ralph, all of that stuff, and then I'm like, well, what should I say? And the lady says, well, say, let's go. You should say, let's go Hawks. I looked at her. I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to say that. I'm not there yet. I'm not ready. So I just said it's a bad day to be a Bronco because we were playing Western Michigan.
It's interesting about that whole, the name change thing, and I went to the University of Utah, so I'm a Ute, and and the Utes they relish that, they love it, so. It was sad, but you got to respect others' wishes. So, this last couple weekends, I got the opportunity to cover the State B boys basketball, State A basketball, and State B girls at the Betty. I don't know if you followed all those games, but Four Winds was almost unbeatable last on Saturday night against Kindred. What are your thoughts on the State B? Some say that's the Super Bowl of North Dakota. The State A obviously is super fast paced. What's your thoughts?
So I know Four Winds went undefeated on the year and they won their championship. I shared it on Facebook, and you've kind of now exhausted my knowledge of high school basketball in North Dakota. I'm 5'8" and really, really slow, and was a wrestler in high school. So we and my parents wouldn't let me go to WDA because back in the 90s, the reason you go down there wasn't to watch basketball. So my parents were born at night, but not last night. So I basketball is the one sport my son loves it. He plays in it. I actually got to do a thing. I'm doing a thing in Congress with the NBA about some criminal justice reform, and I got to interview Ennis Cantor for something, and I think those are the two coolest things my son thinks I've ever done in politics. But if you wanted to do a basketball pod, you'd probably have to do it with him, not me.
No, just asking you about Four Winds there. They're always arguing who would win those State A, State B championship matches. Four Winds was really, really good. I do think Derek Doucette would probably be a little too much for him. I was at state wrestling, though, and I was at state gymnastics, and that's what I was going to ask you about. Dickinson is an absolute powerhouse with 7 consecutive state championships in gymnastics. Tell me, is it like in the DNA in Dickinson? Do they
Yeah,
have the best youth club?
you know, I think one of the things is right. I would say objectively, Dickinson's always competed in wrestling. 3 years ago they won the dual tournament. That was really cool. But I just think when you have a town the size of Dickinson, there's these certain things that end up happening. But I can just tell you why. And it's the same for softball in Dickinson, and it's the same for baseball in Dickinson, and it's the same for gymnastics because we have three great coaches in those three sports. I mean, they just Van. Oh, I'm gonna forget his name. And my daughter was in it when she was young. But I mean, they've just taken that program and they've worked really hard to develop kids, but they also make it fun. I mean, there's no secret why Dickinson baseball is as good as it is. It's Pete Dobitz. There's no secret why Dickinson softball is as good as it is year in and year out. It's because of Amanda Mickey. And the reality of that is when you have a town significantly smaller than Minot, Fargo, Bismarck, if you don't have a coach that's really working with kids and kids want to play for, they'll go find another sport to play. And we just don't have the depth like we do in other communities. So they've just been a powerhouse in gymnastics forever. And I think it's just because they've built one hell of a program and they make it fun for kids. But they also, this is what you were talking about, right? Competitive developmental. And they do a really good job of keeping kids out, keeping kids interested, caring about the kids as they develop through the program instead of just trying to win all the time.
One thing I noticed when I was talking to some Dickinson kids, and I was talking to Charlie Bowman from Lemoore on Saturday night. He's a state football champion. They took third in state B boys basketball, and talking to some rugby kids, Anna Johnson, from rugby. But I noticed a lot of it in Dickinson is they really love playing for their community. I think I find that super interesting. I love that about Dickinson, that those kids, they really are proud of playing for Dickinson. That's kind of a cool, kind of unique thing.
I mean, even if you're at the side, I mean, Dickinson, North Dakota in general travels well, right? Frisco, Texas' favorite football team in the world is the NDSU Bison.
Sure.
UND goes and plays Boston College at Madison Square Garden. There's about 98% of it is green, 2% of it is Boston College, whatever gold I think they were, or maroon, but one of my favorite parts about coaching was, one, I can tell you where all my kids are now, like dentists, chiropractors, all of those things. I care more about what they've done with their life and hopefully teach them that. But Dickinson travels really well, and we're really proud of the teams, and it's always been fun to do that. It was fun to coach in that atmosphere as well.
So, got to give you one tough question, and this is
Sure.
North Dakota's perspective. So I'm going to speak from their perspective. But we're talking about Leah Thomas winning the NCAA championships for swimming. And Biden has signed an executive order. What's your stance on protecting and maybe a women's right to compete against women, and or someone's right to identify who they want to identify with, and their right to compete on how they identify. I mean, where do you stand on that topic?
Oh yeah, that's easy for me. Listen. I mean, I want everybody in the world to be the best person they can be, and they should live their best life. I'm cool with that, but you can't have men swimming against women. It's ridiculous on its face. It doesn't make a ton of sense, particularly at the highest level. And I mean, listen, anybody who looks at that and understands that the lady who took second, it was a bronze medalist in the Olympics, which means she's the third best in the world. I mean, on any given day. And you can accept somebody for who they want to be. You can ensure that they're not accustomed to bullying. They're not, I mean, we don't want any of that. It's a really tough place, but also actually understand DNA and biology. And I don't think those things can be mutually exclusive. And we conflate these things to the worst possible outcome far too often.
So I'll leave you with this, and I know you've got other things to go, but and I'm going to make a statement, but I'd love for your thoughts on it. There was a post, and I got tagged on it on TikTok about some other state and their sports being the best and whatever, and it had some guys slamming down a dunk and whatnot. North Dakota to me, is the best state for sports. And sports go, to me, a lot deeper than having a 6'9" guy dunking balls or a 6'5" Arch Manning throwing touchdown passes. It goes deeper all the way through everything. North Dakota sports to me are like family, and it's community, it's village, and it takes a village to raise people, and everyone goes and travels to the games. I've never seen anything like North Dakota sports, high school sports. I think they're just amazing. What are your thoughts on that? I think we're the best.
Well, I am very biased, but I also 100% agree. When I was when I ran the baseball program, I hired a guy to coach our Legion team out of Billings. He's now helping run the youth team or the youth program in Dickinson, part of the community. My high school wrestling coach, his son works for me in DC. Tessa Gold, who used to work for Senator Heidi Heitkamp's brother, was the West Fargo American Legion coach. We were cutting videos to do all of that stuff. I think the best part about North Dakota sports is that. My favorite thing to do when I go to a Dickinson youth field is watch one of the kids I used to coach coaching his kid. Other than it made me feel real old. One of my best things I ever got. I was in the middle of a campaign. It was my first campaign. It was Easter. It was just one of those grinds. And I got a picture from a parent I used to coach, and they're at a big table for Easter, and everybody's sitting around the table wearing hats. And the kid I used to coach, and his lid is sitting under his chair. And so I just got this text from her, and she said, "Don't ever think you didn't teach him anything." Because the one thing my kids always did, my great grandmother taught me, you don't ever sit down at a kitchen table with a hat on. So we'd walk into a restaurant as a Legion team, and they'd all put their hats under their chair. And that's the part of North Dakota sports that I think is so fantastic. I didn't have a kid in the program. I moved to Bismarck, and I was at that state championship game. Actually, my biggest concern about moving to Bismarck for work is my kids are going to be wearing Bismarck Demons stuff, and I'm not sure I'm okay with that yet. I'll get there, but as an ex wrestler from Dickinson, that's a tough gig for me.
Well, I'll tell you right now, the Bismarck Demons are absolute machine in wrestling, and it's not going to stop anytime soon. My son won the state Triple Crown for the Minot Rattlers, youth wrestling, and at the duel, like the youth duels or whatever, Matt Pack played itself in the dual championship. In the semifinals, their A team beat Tech team like 151-0. So,
but that started with Milo Trusty 35, 40 years ago. And then the kids' Milo coach developed that Matt Pack program and continued to do it. Now their kids are in the program. You've got Schumacher, you've got Scotty Nolan. I mean, I think invariably when you look to whatever sport it is, you got Schmeeker at NDS or at St. Mary's. You can look into these programs, and coaches take a lot of heat. But you look to the programs that have succeeded over time. There's usually one or two people involved in that program, and they're usually the coach that have developed it and made it to what it is. And it's a mentality, it's a way of life, but they also care about their kids. They don't just care about winning. And I think once that shines through, you have a program and you have the potential to do a lot of really cool things with it.
Schumacher is a stud. And it's interesting. My son was wrestling a Matt Pack kid in the state championship. And I'm sitting there watching, and I heard him. He walked up to the guy coaching and then the kid and said, "Hey," he goes, "Watch out, Spain wrestles left foot front and right foot front. So he can shoot with his left hand or his right hand." And he was explaining this to him. And I'm like, how does he even know that? You know what I mean? Like there's 800 kids in Matt Pack, and they all got their own level and, nemesis or whatnot. I mean, he knows a lot about everything. But hey, man, thanks a lot for coming on. It's awesome. I went TikTok live before I came on, and talked to all the kids. I asked any of the kids if they had any questions for you. The number one question they wanted from you was, and we won't make you answer it, but what's better, Class A or Class B sports? So
we grew up in a town with Dickinson and Trinity, and that was always an interesting conversation. They're different, right? Trinity was really good in football when I was there, and Dickinson wasn't. but the average weight of our offensive lineman was probably 65 pounds heavier than Trinity's. So, I mean, the skill positions are one thing, but when you start getting, it's just a volume game. The more kids you have for those non positions, the more depth you have. We
Yeah.
noticed it playing baseball. You get into the losers bracket in a double elimination tournament when you're from Dickinson, you run out of arms and a lot quicker, it seems, than Minot or Bismarck. And I mean, it's just a depth game. They're both fun. People are competing. They're having a great time. The class system works the best because every program should be able to develop a chance to win. You know, if Hettinger is wrestling against Bismarck High every year, you might, that's just, it's not going to end up working. I mean, Kyle Berwick would have been fine, but as a program in general, right, you just get into that space. And wrestling's one of the ones where you can really look at it, because you and I both know that every year there's 3 or 4 kids that win it in Class B that win it in Class A as well.
Yeah, no, yeah, for sure. You got those Carrington kids are ballers, but all right, man. Thanks a lot. I appreciate your time. It was awesome to get to know you a little bit better. Let everyone else get to know you as well.
Anytime you want to talk about sports, I'm in. I think it's helpful when people know that, their members of Congress don't talk about politics 24/7, 365. And any of the kids watching out there, just remember the one thing: the best pitch in baseball is a strike. I don't care what you're throwing, throw it across the plate. Just get it across the plate.
Yeah, and if anyone takes anything from this, he's a Mets and a Dolphins fan, so that tells you he's going to be loyal to North Dakota.
Perfect.
All right, thanks a lot.
Thanks for having me.